Hi, everybody. My name is Lindsay Johnson, and this is my first semester of issues in biology, and I will be presenting my presentation on threats to the Florida manatee. So Florida manatees are currently listed as threatened, yet they have no known predators. Humans are their main predator. Um, Manatees are very important to just the ecosystem in general. They help maintain the health of seagrass beds and they help prevent the overgrowth of seagrass beds. Seagrass consists of most of their diet. They also eat invasive plant species. And then threats that I'm going to discuss in this presentation are watercraft interactions, red tide, fishing net entanglement, and climate change. So this study from Bassett et al. Is a study I'm going to go pretty in depth in. They looked at manatee carcasses and looked at the scar patterns on them. And so it's really important to be able to look at these scars and see if there's a relationship between watercraft interactions and manatees, and to kind of further investigate and evaluate that relationship. For the methods of this study, this was a 10-year study done between 2007 and 2016. The geographical regions in Florida were split into 4 categories. And on the next slide, I'm going to show you a map. They categorized the manatees into 3 groups based on their size: calves, subadults, and adults. They determined if a scar was watercraft related if it matched one of the 3 most common types of watercraft wounds that other scientists have observed. The watercraft scars were based on our knowledge of the parts of a boat that could impact a manatee, such as the hull, the propeller, and just in general, watercraft scars are distinguishable from other types of scars and are fairly easy to identify. The image that I have on here, this image was from the study, and it shows how they documented and color coded these scars that they found on these carcasses. So as I mentioned in the last slide, this is the geographical regions map from the study. They split Florida into 4 regions: Northwest, Southwest, Upper St. Johns, and Atlantic. And you can see exactly where those parameters are on this map. So the results from the watercraft interactions study from the carcasses that they looked at, as a manatee progresses through its life, it will accumulate a large number of watercraft related scar patterns. This graph, which I'll explain in a minute, does support the researchers' conclusion. I really like that this graph is very detailed. It splits manatees into the size categories, so adult, subadult, calf, and then it also categorizes further between the region and the sex. So if you look, you'll see that all of the adults, no matter the region, specifically females, had the most amount of scar patterns. And you can look and you'll see that calves have fewer, the males don't have as much as the females. In terms of scar patterns, it's mostly females that have so many scar patterns, which I found very interesting. So some of the limitations of this study were that scars could be watercraft related, but they weren't consistent with the 3 most common types of watercraft scar patterns. Additionally, the scars could be overlapping, which would make it difficult to identify the source of that scar. Some conclusions that I drew from this study were that most adult manatees have watercraft related scars. The rate of scarring stayed steady over the entirety of the study. And it also looks like it was mostly female adults that had the most scars versus males and subadults and calves. Some of the strengths of the study The design of the study provided a wide array of data points for statistics from which to draw numerous specific interpretations about each category. For example, the graph that was very detailed that we looked at in a previous slide. It was very easy to look at that and say, okay, female from Northwest region, adult, had the most amount of scars. It was just very detailed. I thought that was a strength of the study. A criticism was that the study didn't include specifically within what region they found the manatee. And this could be really important to determine if areas with high boat traffic cause the injury. I also think there should have been some research done about boating activity and boating density within these areas, as they could have drawn further conclusions about how they may impact the number of scars. And then specifically about how this study advances science. This study helps by giving future researchers a baseline for how many watercraft-related scars on average manatees of both sexes, males and females, have on their bodies at various life stages. So then I wanted to compare two similar studies to each other. So I found a study by Gomez et al. 2020 to compare to the Bassett et al. 2020 study. The Gomez study looked exclusively at live manatee scars, while the Bassett study only looked at manatee carcasses. The Gomez study found 97% of manatees had at least one watercraft-related scar, and Bassett et al. Found 96% of all adult manatee carcasses had at least one scar related to watercraft. So those were fairly consistent. And then Gomez et al. Showed that the known females had more watercraft-related scars on average than the males, and that is also what Bassett et al. Found. So that poses a question that I've thought of, which is why are females experiencing more watercraft-related scars than males? And this is definitely where this is an area of research that we need to focus on. So now we're going to look at red tide, specifically K. brevis, the effect on the Florida manatee. The study looked at blood samples taken from manatees rescued from red tide and pre-release manatees at a rehab facility. The study found an increase in oxidative stress in exposed manatees, and oxidative stress can result in inflammation, tissue damage, and free radicals. They also found that lymphocyte proliferation was decreased in the exposed manatee. This could have a lethal effect on immunocompromised manatees. And then the graph to your right shows, I put the abbreviations up there, but the red tide rescued manatees have a significant amount of brevetoxin in their system when compared to the pre-release manatees. So now we're going to move on to fishing net entanglement and ingestion. This study from Reynard, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. This study was a 20-year study from 1993 to 2012, and they looked at live manatee rescues and necropsy reports. Specifically from the necropsy reports, there were, 6,500, over 11% ingested fishing gear or experienced entanglement or both. From the live manatee rescues, over 25% were as a result of ingestion or entanglement in the fishing gear or marine debris. So this chart below kind of separates everything from necropsy and rescues, entanglement, ingestion, and then even further separates it by size. The size is measured in centimeters. It shows from the live rescues that very few ingested the fishing net material, while there was a higher rate of ingestion in the necropsies, and there was a higher rate of fishing net entanglement in live rescues than in the necropsy. So now we're going to move on to climate change. Climate change is obviously a really big issue for the health of the earth and the ecosystem and humans and animals. Specifically, this study from Edwards 2013. When we're talking about Florida, Florida obviously gets hit with hurricanes. So this study mentioned that because of climate change, there would be an increase in frequency and intensity of hurricanes that Florida would experience. Hurricanes specifically disturb seagrass beds, and seagrass makes up most of a manatee's diet. Hurricanes can also result in debris, hypoxia, red tide, sewage, among other things. The other thing I wanted to mention about climate change is red tide is also tied into this. Red tide's becoming more common. I didn't put it in this slide because we talked about red tide earlier, but red tide is related to climate change. It's becoming more frequent. So there is that aspect as well. Elevated CO2 levels, sunlight, temperature, and sea level can also have a negative impact on the growth of aquatic plant life, which would also include the seagrass and other plant material that manatees consume. So to wrap things up, manatees have shown levels of intelligence that can help them avoid danger. Researchers can work with this to help come up with better strategies and laws and policies to help keep them safer. And these threats, all of these threats that I've mentioned through this entire PowerPoint, are manageable by humans, and we have to work together to make it happen and to make it improve. And then this is my graphics citations. And then this is my literature citations. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I hope you learned something. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.